Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Butternomics. I'm your host, Brandon Butler, founder and CEO of Butter ATL, and today, got somebody special in the building. I had to call somebody, because I'm telling y'all, we try to bring y'all people in here that are really doing some amazing things, and we got the one, the only, Miss Shannon Watkins. Shannon, how you doing today?
Thank you, Brandon. I am fantastic.
I'm happy to be here, man. You know, you've been doing some amazing stuff now. You got your new brand, Watkins Brand Advisors, all these good things. We're going to get into it. But for those that don't know, I mean, look, you know, you've done a couple of things. Shannon's one of the most amazing people I know, y'all. I mean, former CMO of Aflac. I know y'all heard about Aflac. I know y'all heard about Jordan Brand, all these other amazing companies. Just Shannon, like, just tell the folks, give them a little understanding of who we have sitting in here today.
Yeah, I am, believe it or not, born and raised in Atlanta. And where I am sitting today is so far outside of my vision board. I would never have imagined this journey. I started out, believe it or not, in biology pre-med. I thought I was going to be a doctor because, like every child of the 70s, I was watching, Cosby Show and looking at the Huxtables and wanted that life and thought I was going to be a doctor. So I went to Fisk University, HBCU, shout out, class of 98. And at the last minute, I was like, I can't do this. I have a weak stomach, a sensitive nose. I have to figure out a different career path. And that's what set me on really the trajectory that I've been on ever since, and that's been at the intersection of brand and culture. I love it.
Now, how does somebody go from biology to marketing, branding, and culture? Like, how does that transition happen?
It happens with a lot of people just letting you tag along. So I wound up my senior year at Fisk being recruited by Procter & Gamble. And back then, you had to take a test to get into P&G. Yeah. I don't know how I passed the test. I really don't know. But I wound up getting an invite to come on campus. And I met one of my best friends, is still one of my best friends today. Her name is Katie Williams. And she was my host on campus. And we had an amazing time, too much of an amazing time, the night before my real interview. And I got the call back to come to Procter & Gamble, and that's where it was so great during that season to be in Cincinnati because you had goats in business. Now looking back on it, goats in business, Ann Simpowski Ward, who is a giant in corporate America. She is now a board member. She is a leader that has been in sports marketing. She's a minority owner of one of the WNBA teams. You have Essie Eggleston-Bracey, who just left Unilever. You have Kim Page, who it's been a goat in corporate America, been at BET. I just had a lot of people who were around, who let me tag along to photo shoots, TV shoots, research. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be a part of creating this. But I had never taken a biology class, never taken an economics class. So I knew I had to go back to school and applied to go through the consortium. If y'all don't know, consortium is a fellowship to some of the best business schools in the country. It's a matching program. And I got into Indiana University, and the rest is history.
Okay, so you were making that transition. You kind of got your foot in the door, but then you said, I kind of go back. Like, tell me about the time at Indiana. I can't talk all of a sudden. Tell me about the time at Indiana University, right? Like, what were you studying there? What did you learn there?
Yeah, I was studying marketing with international business major. I knew nothing, literally nothing. I had to go early to learn how to use Excel. I did not understand economics. I did not understand accounting. I had amazing classmates who were also part of the consortium, really helped me. You know, IU is a place where they don't bring you in to fail. They bring you in to become an alumni. And so it was that mentality that I walked in the door with. So I didn't go in feeling like anything was going to be a risk. I went in thinking that I am going to be wildly successful. And I had a lot of people just wrap their arms around me. A lot of professors that I still am in close contact with today taught me how to think. And I will say that Fisk was great for a lot of things. It helped me belong. It helped me feel extremely comfortable in my skin. But I didn't learn how to think until I went to IU, how to put together logic, how to create arguments, how to really understand how to build a proposition that could not only create brand, but a business. And that's what IU taught me.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I kind of feel the same way when I went to Georgia Tech for my MBA, right? Like, my background was in tech. And, I originally went for the MBA because I had a kind of a mentor that said, you know what, Brandon, like you're really good with this part of it, but you don't really understand a lot of the business side of it. And I remember I just started working at Edelman and, I was getting in like, different kind of conversations. And I agree with you. One thing I realized is that they didn't bring you in there to fail. And I remember that I had that conversation with one of my classmates. I said, "Look, man, we're all smart. We're all made it in here now, but we got to get it." But you definitely taught me how to look at things differently, think about things differently. And what it also did was it stopped me from getting as overwhelmed, because when you have to manage that kind of workload and life and everything else, it's like things get crazy, but it's a little bit kind of easier to manage and process, right? So as you're kind of going through that and now you're getting a little bit more context, when you came out of there, did you have an idea that I want to focus on a specific area of marketing now? Like, because we throw this word culture around all the time now, but like, wasn't nobody talking about culture marketing?
I was talking about culture back then.
Yes. What were you wanting to focus on when you kind of came out?
When I graduated B school, I was 25 years old. I was still very young and still I'd like to tell everybody I walked into Kraft Foods, a very unpolished little penny. I was trying to figure my way out. And when we first got to Kraft back in those days, we used to come in as classes. So it was about 18 people in my class, and everybody was fighting for the best assignments coming into the door. And I remember, everybody was getting their assignments, and some people got Kraft macaroni and cheese, and some people got Jell-O, and they those were the coveted assignments. And I got staffed on stovetop oven classics.
Okay.
They don't even exist anymore because my assignment was to exit that business. And it was my first, and I was mad for weeks because I was like, not me getting the bum assignment. That's how I felt. And one of the VPs at the time, her name is Mary Beth Stone West, pulled me to the side and was like, some assignments, if you do them well, nobody will notice. But if you do them poorly, everyone will see. This is one of those assignments. It taught me the foundation of business. It taught me raw materials management, how to exit, how to talk to customers, how to talk to retailers when you're trying to exit a business. So that was my entry into Kraft. And then, I moved my way on up, worked on stovetop stuffing next, worked on minute rice. But then my marquee assignment was Kraft macaroni and cheese. And that is a business that is steeped in culture, is steeped in Americana. It is one consistent product that has not changed a lot over its history. And when I got on the business, we were launching new products. Back then we were launching, and it was funny because I saw a commercial for the innovation we launched more than 20 years ago. Kraft macaroni and cheese with protein. That's what we were, using Kraft macaroni and cheese with double calcium. And when I was there, we were working with a PR agency, and we were really trying to figure out how to break through. And we had to launch Double the Calcium, and that was the moment I was like, okay, we're going to do something different. And we had a noodle with two heads coming out of the noodle, and it was two little black boys that we put as a face of Kraft macaroni and cheese. And that was the first time that I was like, okay, we're going to reflect the people who actually eat these products. And African Americans are eating these products. And so back then it was something that Kraft didn't do. They didn't have a big multicultural marketing division. They weren't doing a lot of things that push the envelope as far as showing the diversity of America. And that's when I really started to understand how sensitive it is, how great it can be, and when you do it, how much people who love your brand can really fall in love with it just that much more.
Yeah, it's like it's this earth-shattering thing to some brands, right? Where it's like, would you want to put people that actually look like they're using the product in the product, like,
and clean cut and articulate, and we are a diaspora, and it can sell product.
Yeah, for those that don't know, and again, because I know we've both spent time working in and around the agency world, like, give them a breakdown of, because you mentioned it, multicultural versus general market. Like, how do you define multicultural versus general market? Because a lot of people don't know those terms, but they don't understand how much those terms impact their daily lives.
Absolutely. So, over time, let me take a step back. CMOs weren't in the Fortune 500 until the late 90s. So people were just marketing to people, and advertising was pretty generic until they started what's called segmentation, taking your audience and breaking it down. And they started breaking it down first by demographic, how old you are, what race you are, what sex you are, where do you live. And that was the first part of audience segmentation. Then they started taking segmentation a step further to what's called psychographics, grouping people by how they think. And that was a game changer. And that's really what started multicultural marketing. It was the intersection of people who are demographically different and psychographically different. And so when you talk about that difference, general marketing is just, we call it everybody 18 to 54 who live in America, right? That's general marketing. And for most people, that has historically meant Caucasian marketing. But in the 2000s, early 2000s, the term multicultural marketing really started to take off because people realized the economic impact of the growing minorities that have started to really put their economic power behind the economy. So African Americans as a group, Hispanics as a group, and then you start to see things like LGBTQ plus and, those types of groupings. Asians really start to come to the forefront. And that's when you start to really dive into multicultural marketing. But make no mistake, it's all driven by economics. People want to make the money with who they believe has the biggest pocketbook. And African Americans and minorities spend a whole lot of money. And so beginning to market directly to them was as much a philosophical play as it was an economic play for brands.
Okay. Now, you're working at Kraft, Kraft macaroni and cheese, all that good stuff. And I know you didn't just wake up one day and become a CMO. So, what was that path like? Because, again, I think it's really interesting for get people to understand what it takes to get to that level, but kind of help us color in a little bit. What happens between, helping get to that final project there and then, where you kind of ended up at?
Yeah. Right. When I was at Kraft, everything was great. I was being mentored and coached and loved on by a lot of people in that organization. And one day I got a phone call from Conagra Foods. They were moving their headquarters from California to Chicago, and they were wooing people away with money. And that was the first time that I had the opportunity to say, okay, I want to go somewhere because they are paying me more. And that was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my career, the biggest learnings I've ever made in my career, because I did not do my homework, that organization wasn't grounded in consumer insight and research. It was truly a general management factory. It's where people went when they wanted to manage the full P&L. I was on a brand called La Choy, canned Chinese food, right? And when, I was so excited to take that job, but I realized very quickly that job was far beyond the scope of what I was prepared to lead. If something went wrong at the plant, it was a USDA plant growing bean sprouts, they would call me. If we had to sell into Walmart and the pricing structure was off, I was the one getting yelled at. If something happened with the product and we had a recall, I was responsible for it. And so it was a company that wasn't balanced. At that time, it wasn't balanced between growing the consumer alongside growing the business. And I learned very quickly that I need to be at companies where they are both equally as important. From there, I was working at Conagra, and I was in Chicago. I met my husband during that time, got married, and one day Coke called. And what marketer from the city of Atlanta, Georgia, does not want to work for the Coca-Cola company? And I got the call, I interviewed, and I was devastated because I did not get the offer. And I remember getting on the phone with the recruiter, and I said, what did I miss? And they said, you were great, but you just don't have any beverage experience. So I was living in Chicago, and I called the Pepsi bottler, and I said, hey, y'all looking for any help? And they hired me. And I was responsible for helping them fill out their portfolio of things that were not on the PepsiCo trucks. So Muscle Milk at the time, they didn't have a protein drink. They didn't have an orange drink. So I worked with Dr. Pepper Snapple Group to get Crush onto their trucks. And I was there just long enough to be hireable by the Coca-Cola company. And that's when I really started what I call my next chapter of brand leadership.
I think Atlanta is such an interesting place because I always say it's a very entrepreneurial city. But because it's so entrepreneurial, I feel like a lot of people kind of miss what you just talked about, which was the ability to learn how to work inside of some of these large organizations is something I think a lot of people take for granted. I know for me, even from my entrepreneurial, initiatives, just learning how to work, learning how to run a P&L, learning how to run a meeting, learning how things, you can see the difference when you work with people that necessarily haven't done that. Like you see, like hustle can only take you so far, right? But like you need that structure. Like what did working inside those large companies teach you about how business works?
It taught me that number one, you cannot be successful if you don't have people around you who are willing to help you. I had a lot of people at every stop. So just to look at the timeline, I was at P&G for almost 2 years. Then I went back to school. Then I went to Kraft for about 4 years. And then I went to ConAgra for about 2 years. That's before I even made it to director, right? So I had a lot of experiences of making mistakes, bumping my head. I talk to my girlfriends all the time because we're still very close. Back in those days, Nielsen used to come out. Nielsen is the report of scan data to show how your brand sold at retail for the week. They used to come out on Sundays. We used to have to be prepared to lead meetings on behalf of our brands on Monday mornings. What did we do? After church, we would go to the office to get ready for those meetings. We worked so hard. And I will say, people look at these roles and oftentimes think it is either by luck or happenstance. It is relationships and people really helping you. It is a lot of hard work that people don't see, a lot of dedication and long hours. And it's people teaching you. I didn't have the foundation. I didn't know how to run a meeting. I didn't know how to answer a creative question in the right way. It takes time, it takes practice, it takes years to really build your toolkit to be proficient, and then a lot more years leading it to become excellent.
Now you make it to the C-suite eventually. You make it up there, and again, just for the people, because I want to make sure we get this on record. Just remind people, you have been the CMO at what organization?
So I've been the CMO of Aflac. I was the global CMO of Jordan Brand at Nike. And I was a global CMO and head of communications at a fintech company called Fiserv.
So global means the whole world, y'all. That means the whole world. Now tell people, what does a chief marketing officer, for the people that don't live in this world, what does a chief marketing officer do?
Everything. Honestly, everything. When done right, you are sitting at the right hand of the CEO. You understand their vision and their voice, and you're able to truly translate that into narrative for the company that everyone can get behind. So it starts well before you're marketing to any group or any consumer or any business. You first have to really understand the voice of that CEO and make sure that you can live and breathe the messaging that he's or she's trying to put into the marketplace. Then the next step is all of the things that you need to be successful, which at this level, before you even get to the team that you lead, it's the peers that you have to sit beside. Understanding product supply, understanding IT, understanding HR, understanding what the rest of the C-suite really needs to be successful, because without them, you are on an island. And at the end of the day, marketing and communication serves the entire organization, not just the consumer, the messaging that you're putting out there. So that's number 2. Number 3 is, as a marketing leader, today is so much more complex because you are part general, where you have to charge the hill and lead with excellence. And in times of crisis, you are the person that is holding steady. You have to be a true leader in the sense of leading your organization, have to understand people, who you're bringing to the table, where your organization may be gapped, and filling those gaps with excellent people, and be able to architect your vision. Clearly articulate who you are, what you want to stand for. In marketing, we always like to say, if you don't have a narrative, you have nothing. So that narrative is who you are, who you serve, the role you play, and why you play it. Answering those questions with clarity and conviction and convincing everybody else to come along that journey is part 3. And I would say part 4 is your ability to execute. A big part of the discipline of marketing and why it's so hard is because you have to live on the front end of strategy and creating that strategy, But if your strategy can't make it to the market, if you can't execute, if you can't dot the I's and cross the T's and have your work show up in market, you have lost. So a big part of marketing at the C-suite is being able to actually execute on the plan that you create.
How do you define marketing? Because the reason why I ask that is because I tell people, I think people misunderstand marketing and advertising. And marketing has a lot more research involved in it because you're trying to understand what your market is, right? Like, so I just wonder, like, how do you think about the term marketing?
Yeah. When I think about marketing, it lives much more in the land of understanding your brand and being able to articulate it. Let me go backwards. There are three pieces to this. It's your brand, then marketing, and then advertising. Your brand is, who are you? What is your vision for the world? And how do you want to show up in the world executing in that vision? Really being able to articulate that. That's the foundation of your brand. What's your mission? What are you uniquely here to do? Marketing is translating that mission into words that matter, into actions that matter, that everyone associated with the brand can get behind. Advertising is actually putting it on paper, putting it on screen, putting it on on a scroll, and having people understand the mission, your words, and being able to quickly articulate that against what you said and say, I want to buy this. You know, if you think about this as a funnel, marketing is the top end of the funnel of what you actually want to go do. Advertising is the lever that you pull to have somebody act on that, on the words that you're saying.
Yeah, I just hear people throw those terms around so much. And I tell people, y'all, everything ain't marketing, y'all.
Everything ain't marketing. Some of it is brand positioning. Some of it is actual marketing and creating the narrative. But some of it is actually the advertising that you put on shelf. And, you know, if you don't have those first two components right, no amount of money in the world in media buying can save you from a bad ad if you don't have the first two pieces right.
Absolutely. Now, Shannon, I remember when I first met you, we were talking about the duck.
Yes.
And for those who don't know the duck, we're talking about Aflac, right? And you were the CMO at Aflac. And I know a challenge that y'all were kind of dealing with at that time was people knew, they knew about the duck, but they didn't really know what Aflac did in some areas, right? Like, as you kind of think about it, like, how did you start to address and fix that problem? Like, how did you identify that, and like, how did you address that problem?
Yeah, I came into Aflac at a very interesting time because the brand had always had very high awareness, and that's how many people in the U.S. know about you. But you start asking the deeper layer of question, like, what does Aflac actually do? And you get 50 million responses from they are duck handlers to they are supplemental insurance, and nobody really understood what supplemental insurance was. So the first thing we did was started with research. We started with listening to consumers and business leaders to have them articulate what they believed Aflac was. And we used that as the foundation to help us really understand how can we crystallize this message in a way that's repeatable and something that people care about. And the line that we came up with was, Aflac helps with expenses health insurance doesn't cover. It sounds easy. It took us months and months to get there because so many of our constituents were anchored on different things. And so we partnered with a great research firm here in Atlanta, Bantam Group, to help us get there. The next phase of that was, okay, you have now demystified what Aflac is. Help with expenses health insurance doesn't cover. Now, how do you get people to connect to that in an interesting way? And that's when we called, you know, when I find people who are immensely talented, I bring them to every kind of journey that I am on for brand building. And so DC Daryl Cobbin, who is one of the godfathers of marketing at Coke.
DC, he's been on the podcast.
Yeah, DC's amazing. And so he understands the discipline of marketing and brand building. We work together really well. So we tapped him in. We tapped an agency here named Dagger in Atlanta. And we said, how can we start to bring this to life in a unique and compelling way? And we had to start with the ingredients Aflac already had. And they have a deep history in college football, huge media buys in college football. We were not going to disrupt those media buys. And Dan Amos, the CEO, loves himself some college football. So that's where we were going to stay. You got to know what to keep and know what not to keep. And so in the context of college football, if we wanted to educate people on what Aflac was, we said, what better way to do that than hire a coach, because that's what coaches do. And so we said we wanted to get the best college coach that's out there. And I said, Nick Saban. And everybody looked at me like I had three heads. And they were like, you can't get Nick Saban. I said, watch us. And I called a friend, Vince Thompson, who is also here in Atlanta. And we literally went down to the SEC coaches meeting in Florida and sat on a beach with his agent, shared the vision of what we were trying to bring to life, and we walked away with a deal with Nick Saban to lead our campaign. And that's how the fun started with Aflac. And then step two of that, after we had been in market for about a year and a half, we knew we needed to refresh the strategy, keep it fresh, because Nick is a great coach, but he is, he is learning how to be an actor. And we knew we needed someone that could carry this campaign further. And at that time, it was, I'm going to set the context, it was right after George Floyd. Everyone was trying to figure out, how do we do better by this country? And in the world of advertising, that meant I finally had a little bit of freedom to open the aperture to show the diaspora of what the Black experience is in this country and have people connect to it in a more meaningful way. And we knew within the context of college football that we were showing the SEC version of college football. We were not showing the HBCU version of college football. And that is just as deep with tradition and fandom and love that any other aspect of college football is. And so we said, who can be alongside Coach Saban, who can bring swagger, who can be someone that people respect? And the name that came out was Deion Sanders. And this was right when he got signed to Jackson State. And we were a little nervous because he had never coached a game. And this was his first year. And we did not know how he was going to perform. But for us, it wasn't about his performance. We knew he could touch people's lives. And at the end of the day, introduce a whole new audience to what Aflac was, which was insurance for your paycheck. And when people have it, it really does change lives. And so we signed Deion Sanders to star alongside Nick Saban. We called ESPN and said, hey, we want to do more with our media buy. We believe that you have a unique opportunity to showcase the HBCU experience on air in every way. And so ESPN came back with a package for us with a deep dive in HBCU fandom for the season. And so we were the first sponsor of that program. And it was an amazing time at Aflac because the right conditions were there for us to do something different and meaningful. And I am just super proud to say that campaign is still going. That's when you know you have the team did something great.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that was happening even with, Coach Prime and Coach Saban, I think it's interesting, especially with Coach Prime, because like you said, he wasn't even coaching yet, and people knew who he was. But I think that, alongside with the success that he had, at Jackson State before even going to Colorado, kind of helped, raise his overall it probably helped him get that job at Colorado a little bit. You know what I mean? I really want to understand, though, I think people see, like, man, this is cool. Like, because I was getting ready to ask you, okay, you had to go talk to Nick Saban's agent on the beach. Where'd you go talk to Coach Prime at?
Coach Prime, Coach Prime is an amazing human being. And our team reached out to his team. Constance Morini is his agent. And I was really nervous when they pitched this concept to them because we did not have a backup plan for the season. If he said no, we didn't have a backup plan. And as soon as he heard it, he said yes. And I remember meeting him for the first time on set, and he pulled me to the side and he said, "Sister, like, you don't know how much you did for me because you just helped legitimize me as a college coach because you put me beside the most winningest coach in college football history. So you feel like you're doing me a favor. I feel like you're doing me a favor." And that was the foundation of our friendship. It was mission alignment. And so anytime I am partnering with anybody on behalf of a brand, whether it's for something small or something big, what I learned in that experience, when you are mission aligned, that is the difference maker. And that's when your campaign works, and that's when your personalities work, and that's when you can deliver the best work in the marketplace.
And for the people that, are either in corporate or even people that want to work with corporations, like, how do you measure the success of a campaign like that? Like, I always kind of joke with my daughter and say, look, at the end of the day, it always comes down to money. But when you look at that from a CMO standpoint, how do you measure the success of that type of campaign?
I'll go back to when the Duck first launched, and Dan Amos's view, and then this campaign. So Dan Amos launched the Aflac Duck in 1999, heading into Y2K. What was happening? Everybody thought that the world was going to end, and every advertiser pulled all of their commercials out of rotation. Aflac actually was the only TV spot in rotation as we struck the clock from 1999 to 2000. That spot ran in heavy rotation for 2 days. The phone rang off the hook. They had a hockey stick on brand awareness moving from 5% to almost 95%. Fast forward to the work that we did with Deion Sanders. We aired the campaign for the first time. I got hate mail of people saying, "This is not Aflac. This is not Americana. What are you doing to our brand?" And then we started getting all of the website hits of people really wanting to learn more about the policies that we offered. The phone started ringing for the agents to go pitch to new workspaces. And ultimately, it's the stock price. So after we signed Deion Sanders, we saw an uptick in our stock price. That's the ultimate measure of success. And not often can you point to a campaign that's able to move a stock price because big corporations are so complex, and a lot has to do with the conditions, the environment, the economy. Do you have the right pricing? Is your product available? What's going on at that particular moment? But we saw a stock price increase off of a TV spot and a campaign. That's the ultimate measure of success.
Now, how do you go from the Duck to Jordan? Because I'm just saying, like, these are iconic brands. Like, how do you go from CMO of Aflac to the global CMO of Jordan Brand?
Yeah. So while I was at the Coca-Cola Company, I led the Powerade business for 3 years. And that's when I really cut my teeth in sport marketing. I remember being on that business, and it was one of my first months on the brand, and I remember going to the team and saying, "Hey, what's our campaign going to be?" We had bottler meetings coming where we had to showcase our campaign, and then we had to go straight into NCAA, which was our key moment on that brand. And I said, "So what are we doing?" And they looked at me like, "So what are we doing?" And so we had to very quickly meet with our advertising agency. At the time, it was Wyden and Kennedy. And we said, "Okay, where's the campaign?" And they were like, "Your briefs suck. That's why we don't have a campaign." And I looked at them and I was like, "We'll start from a fresh brief. Come back and tell us what you would do." And over a weekend, they came back with the idea of Just a Kid. And that idea at its core is based on the brand positioning that every superstar athlete was once just a kid who believed he could. And what we were was a belief in a bottle. And they came back with a campaign that was Just a Kid. It was focused on LeBron James because at that time he just launched, he started saying that I'm just a kid from Akron. Now I was a month into this business, went and pitched Maverick and his agent, and I knew we had something. And Maverick sat there and looked at me the whole time with his like arms crossed, and I'm like, "What is happening?" And I found out internal politics that the team aligned that they were only going to work on Sprite moving forward, but nobody told us. And so we had a whole campaign that didn't have a home, and we quickly had to pivot. We only had one other star on the roster, and it was Derrick Rose. And over a weekend, we recrafted the campaign around Derrick. And just to put it in perspective at the time, Derrick was facing tons of injuries. His future in the NBA was extremely uncertain. So for us to put Derrick at the center of a campaign was super risky. So we had to craft that campaign around his journey, not his destination. So we created the campaign. I remember seeing it the first time, and my arms stood up on my hair stood up on my arms because we had Tupac's poem "A Rose from Concrete" as the overlay to it. And we launched that spot, and the rest was history from a Powerade perspective. But what it taught me was that sport marketing is one of the only places where you can both connect with people and have them feel something. And I fell in love with sports marketing. Aflac was sports marketing. And when I got the call to join Jordan Brand, it was from the president of the Jordan Brand at the time. He used to work at Coke. And so he saw the work and was a part of the work that I launched on Powerade. And I went over, and at first I was like, okay, I'm not a sneakerhead. I'm not in the Nike system, because Nike typically only puts people in those roles who are in the Nike system, who grew up in that system. And I was like, I'm female. I'm from the South. You sure you want me on this brand? And they were like, yes, we think you have an interesting perspective to bring to bear. And, at that time on Jordan Brand, it was 2002. The Jordan year was 23. And I remember walking into the room and saying, okay, what is our plan for our Jordan year? And everybody looked at me and said, what is our plan for Jordan year? So that continues to be a theme throughout my career, having to step into places and very quickly assess the situation and figure out what should we do. And we started with a lot of interesting insight. And for people who love the Jordan Brand, you guys know that this brand was created by MJ. He's still very much alive. He will always be the GOAT. It was built on his play, but the streets validated Jordan Brand. Back in the day, it was the streets who wore his shoes and validated that brand. And they wore it because of the greatness that he was able to portray, and they wanted to be great too. And as I stepped into this role, I recognized that it's been more than 20 years since MJ played a game. And this generation, I felt, simply didn't care and didn't know. And I had to figure out how to take the legacy of this brand and connect it to the identity of future generations. And that identity was one of self-belief. If you think about MJ, he believed in himself. That's how he won. And this generation of youth, they are compulsively forward-looking because they've grown up immersed in technology. They believe in themselves. They want to identify with communities that also share their same beliefs. And that was the bedrock by which I kind of led the Jordan Brand. Legacy can only take you so far. It can't transform you. You have to be future-facing. And so I was grateful to learn so much from so many talented people that were on that business. People like Reggie, who is a GOAT in entertainment marketing. He was on my team. I learned so much from him. I learned so much from other leaders who had been in that organization, and they allowed me to really come to the table with my different point of view, but still contribute meaningfully to the legacy of that business.
Well, from a different point of view standpoint, is that how this whole campaign with Tiana Taylor came about?
Yeah, Tiana is amazing. I'll start there. Her team is amazing. And when I first joined the brand, they told me that she had a shoe cooking, and I was like, okay, let's see the shoe. And then I remember being on a call with her and her team. And early calls, my posture is I typically listen and I don't say much. And I just heard her talk, and she was extremely frustrated. She was frustrated creatively. And I remember getting off the phone with Reggie and was like, what's happening here? And he said she has so much more to share and contribute than we are giving her space to. And we were getting ready to start to architect the anthem spot for NBA All-Star, which was February 2023. So this was going to be my first campaign as CMO. And I was like, you know what? Let's shake this thing up. NBA, let's not focus our spot on men. Let's focus our spot on women. So we told the story of a female baller and her journey to self-belief. And I called Tiana and her team and I said, okay, how would you like to partner in this? We think there's an amazing opportunity, and we asked them to help us with the music bed for the track. And, I am an old school person at heart. I love old school soul. And I remember us digging in the crates and we found a Minnie Riperton track that was the perfect complement to the words on the page. And then we asked Tiana, okay, this is going to be our launch spot. Can you take this a step further? She took that music track and crafted a visual story of our entire women's collection for spring, crafted it, directed it, found the talent for it, and we put it out in market. And so that was my first time experimenting with a creator that was that intentional, that much love for the craft, and her team, the aunties, that much love for what they were doing. And it really did open my eyes for how creator and influencer partnerships can take shape to help drive brands, because they can bring you an audience and they can bring you the craft in a way that truly breaks through in ways that you can't do on your own as a brand. The reality is people no longer trust brands. They trust people. And so allowing another creator to really step in and lead the conversation opened our eyes and my eyes for what is possible. And that was a lesson that I carried forward and will continue to carry forward throughout my entire career.
Yeah, so what does that shift mean for creators, especially Black creators, right, in today's market? I just did a big event that I literally created myself called Creators of Color here in Atlanta. And it's, my baby. I've done it for the last 3 years. We don't have any major brand partners, but I'm telling people one of the reasons why I do it is because I try to bring people in from the corporate side, from the agency side, people that are doing it, practitioners, because I know people want to build businesses around creativity. But like, as a person that has been, on that corporate side, and now, you got your own business that you're running as well, what should Black creators know about, how to build a business around their creativity?
Yeah. I'm going to start first with the perspective of the brand, and then I'm going to talk about the creator. From the perspective of the brand, so much has changed over the last, I'd say, 5 years. I'm not even going to say 10 years. I'm going to say 5 years. We have a political season that has created massive distrust. You overlay that with AI, and people no longer trust brands. And so in the past, brands used to be able to take a message to marketplace and it would move the needle on somebody choosing you, to buy you, to follow you or not. That playbook is dead. And now brands are forced to confront the fact that if you want to build your audience, you have to do it differently. The way brands used to think about creators, and I'm going to dare say influencers, is that you are delivering content. That's what we're buying from you. But the reality is that most modern brand builders understand that when you're partnering with creators or influencers, what you're buying is their audience. The output is the content. That's a mind shift set for brand builders, because that's not how we were trained or raised, right? And so from a creator point of view, it's going in with that message to say, I'm going to give you great creative, But that should not be the lead into your argument or your pitch to any brand. It should be, I understand your business. I think there is a linkage between the mission of your business and the mission of my business, and the audience that trusts me, understands me, follows me, and looks to me for any type of advice or influence. I think they would benefit from me talking about your brand. And the output is the content. That's not the entryway. It's a different way to think about it. And if creators and influencers enter the conversation that way, I believe it speeds success. If I think about somebody who's doing that really, really well right now, it's Issa Rae. Issa is extremely talented, and her team, Hooray Media Ensemble, extremely talented. Issa has a track record for creating content, but underneath it is a business model based on the fact that she can gather audiences and have them really become community in a way that a lot of people cannot today. That audience is the product. And brands are now starting to understand that people don't trust me if it comes from my brand voice. And most of the time, they're not as interested in what I have to say, but they're more interested in what a creator has to say. And if you are excellent at your craft, if you understand your mission, if you understand your lane, and if you are fast to create ideas that have meaning and matter, then your pathway to successful brand relationships will be a lot smoother.
Let me ask you just, again, I just want to kind of like zoom in on that a little bit, because I always kind of say, Butternomics is a tactical podcast. And so just, I hear people say things like, tell the brand that you understand your audience, but like, how does a creator actually communicate that to a brand? Like, what should they be doing? Like, what type of research? Like, just like, what are the things that they should come to that brand with that show that they understand their audience and they understand the mission of that brand?
I would say do your research on that brand, but do it beyond looking at their social feed. Look up their earnings reports. Earnings reports are one of the most underrated resources for any creator trying to work or partner with a brand, because an earnings report is from the voice of a CEO, and they tell you publicly what they're focused on. They tell you publicly in lines where their care is for the communities that they serve, and they tell you with certainty the products that they are aiming to deliver over the next quarter and over the next year. Review the earnings reports. Don't just look at their social feed. That's number one. Number two, build relationships with people who have some type of connection to that brand. The brand building world is really small, especially when you start to look at the higher levels of leadership. Most people are 2 phone calls away. You can, through relationships, get some kind of flavor for what a CMO is focused on. Look at their LinkedIn profiles, look at what they're saying publicly. Most of the time, they're pretty upfront with it and pretty honest. And that is also intentional because they are trying to attract the right partners to their brands.
What do you think about, brand building and just this overall creative economy that you believe that a lot of people might not be ready to hear?
I believe a lot of brands may not be ready to hear that people don't really care as much as they think they do about the content that they're putting out. A lot of brands are spending multi-million dollars of production dollars, making very polished, beautiful stories that most people don't care about. Most people care about what's happening to someone they can relate to, a person they can connect with. And those stories carry much greater weight than any story a brand can tell on one side. The other thing, and so if you take that a step further, the agency model is being disrupted real time. I don't think a lot of agencies are ready for the fact that if you don't figure out how to create more content that breaks through authentically with culture in a production model that is much easier to execute, that's closer to your idea, and much cheaper, you will be out of work. Point number 2. Point number 3, creators really are the future because there's so many tools that are available for them to not only build their audience in the right way, but to create content that's meaningful, that they really are the future of the industry and the future to think about production. But they also have to understand you can't buy influence. A lot of people get into the influencer game or the creator game and they work really quickly to try to build their audience. But people snip through inauthenticity. And if you are not authentic and if you are not building something that is authentic to you, people will sniff through it and you will not be successful long term. One of the creators that I've had, and I'd say the business leaders, because she's not just a creator that I've had the pleasure of working with, is Tabitha Brown. And she is one of the best in the game because she is completely authentic to who she is every single time she shows up. And every word that comes out of her mouth is core to who she is, and it's intentional to the types of partnerships she wants to build. And she's been consistent over the years. I've seen some influencers get in and they are trying to grab for the money. They're trying to get the biggest brand deals they can, and they are inauthentic or not mission aligned, and they're doing it really fast without the small business infrastructure behind them. A lot of creators forget the fact that this is a business. You are an entrepreneur. You are a business entity. If you don't have the right infrastructure around you, and I'm not saying that you have to have $50 million in the bank. I'm not saying that at all. You can start with $500 in the bank. But if you don't scale it carefully, and if you don't have the right team around you and think about this as a business, you will fail because you will not have the infrastructure to be able to support your long-term ambition.
And so with Watkins Brand Advisors now, like, where do you all sit in that ecosystem? Like, what did you see that wasn't happening that you felt like needed to exist?
Yeah, I'm going to start personal, and then I'm going to talk business. I just turned 50, and as a woman of a certain age, you start to look ahead and you start to look backwards. And I'm born and raised in Atlanta, and I have a lot of family members here. And a lot of them, unfortunately, that I'm really close to have started to pass away. My Uncle Grady, who I love, my Aunt Bernice, her funeral was yesterday. And you start to really take stock of what's important to you and where you think you are uniquely gifted at. And I heard a preacher say one time, and I'm probably not going to get the words right, but don't waste God's mind, lungs, and tongue on things that do not give you life and bring life to others. And I started to think about the career I had to date. I was leading great organizations and great brands and great people. I had amazing experiences all over the world. But the higher I got, the more I had to, as a good corporate steward, make decisions that were not aligned with my personal value set. And as a EVP, CMO, C-suite member, you have to do these things. It's not an option. And I started to really take stock of, do I want to do this again? Or do I want to really take everything that I've learned and focus on trying to help people? And that's when I started Watkins Brand Advisors. I started this journey out really focused on brand revival. That's what I thought this was going to be, where I could come in and help businesses who were stuck at a certain place, who needed a little bit more oomph, who needed some revival, because that's really where the brands that I have led, where I've been able to get them over the hump, whether it was Powerade or Aflac or Jordan Brand, all of them have that in common. They needed a bit of a revival. But as I've gotten into this, and I'm still very early in, I am helping not only people with brand revival needs or companies with brand revival needs, but I'm helping CEOs who are stuck. I am helping nonprofits who are stuck. I am helping venture teams that are stuck. And I am helping people in entertainment better understand how to connect with brands in more meaningful ways and drive longer term partnerships built on mission alignment. And that's what I think I'm uniquely skilled at and uniquely blessed to do. And in this season, I am open to wherever I am destined to be, and I'm following a path, and I'm not saying no to opportunities, but I do recognize that I am a small business and I have to think of myself in that way and only scale when I have the infrastructure to do so.
How has it been? I mean, do people understand that? Like sometimes I feel like people don't understand they have a problem, or they don't recognize they have a problem, or better yet, they think they have a problem. And you're like, no, actually, it's over here. Like how have they kind of accepted that perspective from you?
That's where I love to play. I have one person that I've brought on so far who is, I call her my partner in crime. Her name is Lucretia Cade. She has been helping me in this journey, but I have a network of amazing people who are helping me on this journey. And typically it starts out as a marketing discussion or a narrative discussion. But because I've had the purview of sitting at the management table at so many different companies, I'm able to recognize patterns. And I'm able to see, no, you think you have a narrative problem, but you really have a strategy problem. Or you think you have a narrative problem, but you really have an HR problem because your teams don't understand the narrative. And if you ask the teams to do something different, then your long-term strategic plan needs to change. That's the scope of your problem. So what I'm finding is what starts out as a narrative issue is turning into a much deeper diagnosis of their business challenge. And that's what I love to figure out. I love marketing. I love helping people craft better narratives to come back with better marketing plans for better advertising. But I don't think only in one vertical. And that's where the real unlock happens, when you can change hearts and minds and enterprise business strategies for good.
Shannon, look, this is definitely, been one of my favorite episodes because again, you've given them a little bit of everything. You've given them the corporate side, given them the entrepreneurial side, and just one last thing I would ask you is, with everything you're building right now with Watkins Brand Advisors, right? Like, what does success look like in this next chapter for you?
I'm going to go backwards a little bit and then go forward. I am from Atlanta, and my mom, dad, everybody from here. And when I was growing up, my mom used to work at a law office. Then she worked in City Hall, and then she worked for the Atlanta Olympics. And during those times, I didn't understand exactly what she did because I just knew she was going to work every day and working her butt off, right? But she used to come home and mention names like Andy and Maynard and Shirley and Gary. And I did not realize, it took me years to realize that she was talking about Maynard Jackson. She worked in his law office. Then she went over to City Hall and worked for him and Andy Young, and she worked for Shirley Franklin, and she worked for Gary Walker. And what she was doing in Atlanta was helping small businesses and Black and brown people get their fair share of contracts. And when she went to go work for the Olympic Games, she played the same role of helping teams ensure equal economic opportunity for this city. And as of late, I've been asking her more and more questions about that time in her life. And now, as I am sitting on the other side, I really do feel like my mission and success for me is carrying on her legacy and helping make sure that women and brilliant Black and brown communities have an equal opportunity to win. And for me personally, I've sat around a board table for a big chunk of my career. There are not many people with my background who sit on corporate boards, and a lot of them who do are not modern board members. Success for me is to paint a different picture of what modern board leadership for corporate America can look like and be, and open the aperture for what contributing to corporate America can look like, but in a different way. That's success.
I love that, man. Shannon, again, this has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate you, stopping in between, like I said, the important stuff to come over here with little old me over here at Butternomics, you know what I'm saying?
Big O you, big O you.
But no, what you're building is amazing. Before we get out of here, please, how can people get in contact with you? How can they reach out about Watkins Brand Advisors? I always say, give them all the things.
Give all the things. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm much more active on LinkedIn and then the Gram. I have my website up and running, Watkins Brand Advisors. I am excited to build what's next.
Absolutely. We're excited to see it. And, you have a friend over here as always. We appreciate you pulling up the Butternomics. It's been an amazing conversation. And with that said, y'all, that's the pod. We out. Peace.